everyone. We're so glad you can join us for this webinar hosted by JFL Total Wealth Management to address some charitable giving ideas during the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as tax strategies you can apply to your personal charitable donation plan for those organizations and causes you are most passionate about. In this current era of trying times, many of us want to help our neighbors and fellow Americans in need. There's record unemployment, overwhelmed food banks, overstressed healthcare systems, and fragile savings plans that have left many overstressed healthcare systems, have left many Americans in need of American immediate assistance. In addition, nonprofits and charitable organizations are facing significant hardships trying to supply the needed services. Today, JFL wants to provide some tax strategies to consider when making charitable donations, as well as to break down some of the charitable incentives featured in the CARES Act that was passed by Congress on March 27th. We encourage you to send in questions on the questions feature that's on the team, and we'll answer as many as possible. If we run out of time, we'll follow up with you directly. And if your specific question is not read during the webinar, we'll follow up with you as well. So a recording of this video will also be posted on the JFL website at jfltotalwealth.com/webinars. So without further ado, let's introduce our panelists for today. Jeanne Kane has an MBA from Duke University and is a certified financial planner. She has extensive experience with analyzing and managing our private clients' portfolios and with and developing comprehensive financial plans. Lynch is a certified financial planner and has been an independent financial advisor for 23 years. As you may all know, we celebrated our anniversary last week, and has been working in the financial industry for more than 30 years.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Looking forward to working with you.
So to start off our webinar today, we wanted to do a quick poll that we're hoping you can participate in. It's to understand how the pandemic is affecting your ability to actually make charitable donations this year. So if you take a moment, if you wouldn't mind answering this, we're interested in seeing if you're planning to give more, the same, or less to charitable organizations this year than you did last year. So we'll give everybody just another minute to do this, and then let's see what our results are. So based on these results, it looks like we kind of have an even amount of people planning to donate a little bit less this year, and some people planning to donate the same amount, with about 10% being able to donate more this year. So I think it kind of reflects the kind of uncertainty of the market and how people feel about their finances. So before we get started with the main part of this presentation, I know Jerry wanted to touch on a couple things before we get started.
Yeah, one of the reasons why we do this is simply because I think we work with a lot of very talented individuals out there that have saved quite a lot over the years and live below their means, and because of that, they're in a position where they could actually help people. There are people who are inspired by events that have happened in their lives. There's people that are inspired just because of things that are happening around them. And part of what we do is to kind of see what we could do to make this as easy as possible and as tax efficient as possible. So by making it easy and trying to systematize it, we could generally do more than what we're normally doing. And by making it more tax efficient, one of two things could happen. Either you could do the same amount as you're doing right now, but it saves you a couple of bucks and you take the family on vacation or something like that. Or you could do more than what you're doing right now and it'll cost you exactly the same amount. Especially if you're contributing a decent amount on a systematic basis, there's probably ways that we could do it much better than giving cash. So I think today what you should do is take some notes, and if something seems like it's of interest to you, write it down, and then when we do our review, we can kind of have a conversation about it to see, A, does this work for you based on your tax situation, the amount of money you want to give, and so forth. And we could try to come up with a couple of ideas that could help you do what you're wanting to do from a charitable standpoint. So today what I want to do is go through a couple things. Number one is I want to talk a little bit about the recent updates in some of the laws from the CARES Act and how it applies to individuals with charitable contributions. I want to talk a little bit about different types of basic strategies for creating more tax efficient ways to give money to charity, and really talk about some of the things that you should be doing right now to protect yourself, because in spite of the fact that everybody seems like they're trying to help right now, there's a lot of people trying to take advantage of the situation. At the end, we'll have some question and answers, so I would encourage everybody to send in whatever you can send in, and we'll do whatever we can to answer those. And if not, we can't get to it today, what I'll do is I'll get you offline and make sure we specifically handle your situation. So, Jeanne, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's happening out there in the big wide world?
Here we go. We hit the U.S. headlines, or hit the headlines. So the U.S. has more people infected with the coronavirus than any other country in the world, and we're still number one, unfortunately. As of this morning, there were more than 1 million Americans who have had the coronavirus. Worldwide, the number of cases has topped 3 million people. You know, it sounds a lot of doom and gloom, and we hear tons of doom and gloom out in the news. But there are some glimmers of hope and some little positive notes out there. And there are over 935,000 people worldwide who've recovered from the coronavirus. So that's some good news there. If we look at the social distancing guidelines and quarantines, you know, those are in effect until the end of the month. And while, you know, New York State and New Jersey, they've extended our mandates to go through mid-May, there are actually 12 states that are starting to slowly open their economies back up. And just last week, the White House released guidelines for a 3-phased approach for how to open up America again. In terms of taxes, hey, some good news here. You know, our tax returns, that deadline was extended to July 15th. And for those that live in, you know, the tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, your state taxes were extended to that date as well. A little over a month ago, the federal government passed the CARES Act, and it was the largest stimulus package ever at $2 trillion. And it was really designed to help individuals, families, and business owners. And just last week, you know, the government added an additional kind of a supplemental plan for $484 billion, with the bulk of that going towards the businesses and the PPP and the small business loans. Now, within the CARES Act, there are provisions to encourage charitable giving, and that's what we're going to talk about in a little bit. But before we do that, let's do a little history lesson with charitable giving. In 2017, the Tax Cuts Job Act, I can never say that easily, but the Tax Cuts Job Act, that became law. And 2 of its goals were to lower the overall tax rate and also to simplify the tax code. And one of the ways it simplified kind of the tax code and tax prep was by increasing the standard deduction. The standard deduction basically doubled for all of taxpayers. You can see the numbers up here on the screen. We're now at $12,400 for individuals and $24,800 for married couples. And by increasing the standard deduction, that resulted in 30 million fewer taxpayers who are itemizing their taxes. Now, itemizing can get complicated, and reducing the number of people who itemize really resulted in a more simpler tax prep. But on the flip side, that higher standard deduction, that basically wiped out the tax benefit for charitable giving for people who use the standard deduction. You know, for example, my husband and I, you know, we've always given money to our church. Before the Tax Cuts Job Act, we were able to itemize and get that tax benefit for our donation. However, after the act was put in place, we still give the same amount of money as we always did, but now we have to use the standard deduction, and we really don't get the tax benefit for our giving. So I'm one of the 85% of taxpayers who now files using a standard deduction, and you may be too. When Congress passed the CARES Act, you know, they added this provision in ways to kind of help, you know, encourage some charitable giving. Have you ever heard the saying, "Many hands make light work"? Well, that's a little bit of the thinking. The hope is that to get many people to contribute, even in small amounts, and then give them some benefit by doing so. What I want to do next is just walk you through and understand kind of the difference and see how the impact of size, like the size of your charitable contribution, how that can impact whether you get tax benefit from giving or not. We're going to compare what happens to this couple if they give $4,000 to charity versus 10. So let's start up here with the deductions for the state and local property taxes. These are our SALT taxes, and these are always capped now at $10,000. And then if we look, we've got other deductions that come into play, like our mortgage interest or healthcare expenses, and those are also in this example set at $10,000. With the $4,000 deduction, donation, excuse me, the couple filing jointly, they have to use the standard deduction. That's because the total that they're giving, you've got with the deductions, you've got $10,000 in SALT, $10,000 other deductions, and $4,000. That $24,000 that falls below the standard deduction threshold of $24,800. So here they've gone ahead and they've given to charity, and they really didn't get a tax benefit for doing so. And that's because they would have gotten that same standard deduction, that $24,800, whether they gave their $4,000 or not. Now, most people, you're not giving to charity for tax reasons. You're doing it because you want to. When we look at the $10,000 donation side, the couple here, they're able to itemize. Now, they won't get a full tax credit for the entire $10,000 that they gave to charity, but they will get a partial deduction. At the federal tax rate of 32%, this could be about $1,700 in savings. Now, one of the strategies that Jerry's going to get into in a little bit, it's kind of called bunching, or bunching of your charitable contributions. For example, if every year you give $2,000 every year to various charities, you may decide that this year you want to give $10,000, and then you don't give again for another 5 years. By kind of bulking that, you're giving the same amount of money away to your various charities, but by putting it and doing it all in 1 year, you might be able to take advantage of itemizing your deductions and then getting some tax benefit for it.
So part of the CARES Act now, for people who are itemizing, this really won't apply, because if you're hitting your threshold, you're passing the 24/8 if you're a husband and a wife, or 12/4 if you're single. You could deduct any contribution you have going to charity. But if you're using the standard deduction, one of the things they put in is that you get a $300 with someone's an above the line deduction, meaning that you don't need to pass the threshold. We don't have to worry about passing that 12/4 or that $24,800. Again, this is applying specifically, the $300 applies to those using the standard deduction. If you are itemizing because your deductions are coming out larger, it means that we don't really need to worry about that. For the $300 aspect of it, you need to have a cash donation. You can't use appreciated securities or anything like that, and you can't use a donor advised fund, and I'll get in a little bit to that as well. And also, this can't, not to be confused with the qualified charitable deduction available from IRAs, which we'll spend a little bit of time on as well, too. You could deduct up to 100% of your income. Formerly, that was 60%. If you can't fully use that deduction in this year, you can carry forward another 5 years. And it only applies to cash gifts to public charities. Private foundations do not apply. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that as well, too. So a couple of things. So how do I make it deductible? And Jeanne briefly mentioned something called bunching deductions. So in that first scenario, we had $10,000. That's the limit you have for state and local property taxes. $10,000 is a number we just came up with for mortgage interest or medical expenses, and I had $4,000. So in order to be able to deduct anything, I need to pass that threshold, which was $24,800, and I got up to $24,000. So none of that money did anything from a tax standpoint. It still went to the charity I wanted to, and that's important. However, I didn't get a tax benefit for it. Well, one of the first things that we can do is that we can do appreciated securities, and understand why this makes sense. Okay. First of all, if I were to give $1,000 to charity, it costs me probably $1,500 that I have to earn to pay income tax to have $1,000 that I give to charity. I give that $1,000 to charity. I'll probably get $300 back on my income taxes. So it's not really that tax efficient. I started with $1,500. The charity gets $1,000. I get a couple bucks back. What if I were to give appreciated securities? Now, the reason why I like this is, first of all, often when I take a look at a portfolio, there's one or two stocks that dominate the portfolio. For myself or for my mom, it's Pepsi Cola. My father worked there. My father passed away like 30 years ago. She still has a stock, and it's grown and grown and grown. Because of that, it's very difficult to sell because it's got such a big gain in it. We don't want to sell it, so we end up holding it and holding it and holding it. What I could do is I could give that appreciated security to the charity directly, and I eliminate any capital gains tax that I have to pay or state income tax. So I'm just going to give you an example right here. And Gretchen, there we go. I have 100 shares that now are worth $55 a share. Okay, so the total value of that is $5,500. And again, it's the same for both situations. On the right-hand side, what I'm going to do, I'm going to sell the stock and basically have to pay a tax of 21%, which is 15% in federal, 6% for the state of New Jersey. So basically I have to pay $1,050 to the federal government in the state of New Jersey. If I donate the stock, I don't have to pay any capital gain or state income tax. Okay? So basically I don't pay any income tax there. So the gift contribution that I do when I'm given in the appreciated securities is $5,500. In the second situation, because I had to pay that tax, I'm giving them $4,450. So in this situation, the charity is benefiting by another $1,050 because of the way that I'm doing this. Okay. The second benefit that I get from that is because I'm giving $5,500 to charity, I'm getting a larger tax deduction on that money. Now I use the savings as 32% federal, 6% for the state. So I'm getting about $2,090 back in a tax benefit for giving that money to charity. When I had sold the securities and I had lesser money that I gave, the deduction I get is, or the money I get back is $1,691. So in this situation, the charity ends up with more than $1,000 more by doing it this way, and I end up with $400 back more in my pocket. Now, with that $400, I could do one of two things. I could take my family out for dinner, or I could give more money to charity. Either way, I think that I have a lot more control over my money by doing it this way. Now, again, when I make that donation of that security, it's based on the value of the security that day. So if the stock is at $55 and I donate to that charity today, I get it at that value. If the stock goes down the next day, I don't lose any of my benefit. I get it for the value of the security that day. Okay. Now, another thing that works very well is something called donor advised fund. The donor advised fund works very similarly, but basically what it allows us to do a little bit different is we're generally doing larger contributions. In that illustration we were showing before, what we had shown was that in that first situation, we gave a $4,000 contribution. We missed being able to itemize by this much. In the second situation, we gave a $10,000 deduction, which is terrific, but more than half of that contribution didn't count because I had to pass the 24-8 before any of my money started becoming tax deductible. What if we did more? What if we budgeted this over the next couple of years and we said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to do 5 years worth of contributions. We're going to do it now because we had a very high income year. Either we had a great year in the stock market, we had a very good year from a business standpoint. Our income is high and I could use the deductions this year. So what I might do this year is make a larger contribution into a donor advised fund, and they're available through Schwab. Many of us are using those right now. Fidelity has them, many companies have them. But what will happen is we'll make a larger contribution, generally of stock, appreciated securities, into that charitable trust. Now, just like in that last illustration that we were talking about, by using appreciated securities, first I'm eliminating any capital gain tax and ordinary income. So that in itself is pretty terrific. The second thing is, since I'm doing a lot larger contribution, I am blowing way past that threshold of the standard deduction. So I don't need to deal with this next year and the following year and the following year, because I hit it this year and I'm doing it at a level where I could fund myself for the next few years going out. Now, again, you can use cash, but I cannot stress this enough. Cash is one of the worst things to do simply because I don't get any leverage. When I use the appreciated securities, I'm eliminating the capital gains and the income that I would have to pay to the state. I get an immediate tax deduction on the money that I put into that charity. But what's nice is the money grows tax deferred, and I decide when that money comes out. So I don't need to make a very large charitable contribution this year. I could do a little this year. I could do a little next year. I could do another little bit the next following years. And I could just systematize how I'm giving out money. So what I could do is if I want to give money to the Make-A-Wish Foundation or the Jillian Fund, I know, George, you're out there, I could basically have that money coming out on a systematic basis. I just call them up and say, I want $1,000 to go out to this charitable organization. I want $1,000 to come out to this church. And basically the money will be sent directly to them. I'm not getting any deductions in the future years when that money's going out to the charities, but I got it in the main year that I did it. There are some administrative fees for setting up these programs. Again, these companies are doing it. They're managing the money. However, I think they're way worth it in terms of the tax benefits that are doing it. They also have minimums. This type of program does not make sense if you want to do a $100 contribution. These are generally for larger contributions. And again, I may combine this on a year that I have high medical expenses, because if I'm limited to $10,000 in state and local property and I have a high medical year, a lot of medical expenses, that may make hitting the threshold a lot easier for me to do that. And the funds can't be used to support political groups, crowdfunding, or private foundations. So there are definitely some restrictions that are on it, but they're pretty broad. And in these types of situations, it could save a tremendous amount of money. So Jeanne, why don't you tell us about it?
Go ahead and walk through an example for you. And this is somewhat similar to what Jerry walked through earlier with gifting securities. It's just a little bit on a bigger scale. So if we look at kind of the difference, we're going to compare selling stock and giving the proceeds to charity versus gifting through a donor advised fund. You're really going to see how, a way to giving through a donor advised fund, it can create that win for charity as well as for you. So let's start, if we start at the top and kind of looking, and we've got 1,000 shares worth $55. So that's about $55,000 worth of securities you have to give to charity. Now, way back when we bought the stock and we paid $5,000 for it, its value's increased by about $50,000. So if we sold the stock and we gave it to charity, we would owe capital gains on that $50,000 worth of proceeds. In our example here, we're at 21%, we have to pay 21% taxes. That would be 15% for long-term capital gains tax plus 6% for state taxes. Now, it's possible you could be in a higher tax bracket, in which case the $11,550, that's going to be even higher, cutting into even more of what you'd be able to give to, that ultimately would go to charity. Now, if we compare to the donor advised fund, you don't owe any taxes at all on that. And here's where we see the win for charity. Charity is going to be able to get an additional $11,550. They're going to get that more than if you donated if you sold the stock and then you donated the proceeds. You're going to be able to give that much more if you use a donor advised fund. The charity's really going to get the full benefit of what's coming out of your pocket, and what you're giving, that's going to be what they get. So your dollars go a little bit further. Now let's take a look at the win for you. If say you're in the 32% tax bracket and you give to the donor advised fund, that charity, they're going to get the full, they got the full $55,000, and then you get a $17,600 deduction. If you sell your stock and you're also in that 32% tax bracket, you're only going to get a little less than $14,000. And that's because you had to pay those capital gains taxes on what you sold, and ultimately, again, you're giving the charity less. So if you look at the difference between those strategies, that's the win for you. That's the $3,696. And you can do one of two things. Jerry, earlier he was by gifting the securities directly, by selling appreciated securities, he was able to take you to dinner. But here in this case, you can maybe go on a nice vacation, do something nice for your family. Or if you wanted to, also you could take that difference there and give that to charity as well.
So there's also some very interesting strategies. Again, I work with some people that fortunately have excess money. Again, they've saved, they live below their means the entire year. And in their IRAs, one of the things they don't need is to take out distributions on a systematic basis. Now, we talk to everybody about Roth Conversions, especially with the amount of spending that's happening right now. I think there's a tremendous benefit of paying the taxes today and knowing that that money is income tax free forever. Okay, so what I could do is that if I'm making a $20,000 charitable contribution, okay, whether it's to a donor advised fund, directly to a charity or so forth, I'm getting a tax deduction against my income for $20,000. If I do a Roth conversion of $20,000, I have taxable income of $20,000. In essence, what I could do is I could offset the income tax that I have to pay on a Roth conversion by using a charitable contribution, okay? So there's a way that I could balance this thing out, resulting that I don't have to take out any distributions. Now, again, from an investment standpoint, these things are all related. So one of the things that happens is when I do a Roth, I can invest more long-term. If I don't need to take out minimum distributions at 72, all right, and I know that I have a longer horizon, I could be a little bit more aggressive with the money because I don't need to take out distributions right now. I could also be more investing it for my children, thinking about how can I grow my money a little bit more effectively for my heirs. But there's some tremendous planning opportunities that I could do by doing these types of programs, and this is one of the ways that we could do it. Now, another thing that you could do, which I think is very interesting, is that we could use charitable contributions. Now, this is basically if you're required to make minimum distributions out of your IRAs, and that happens right now when you're 72. Okay, so you're required at some point to start taking out minimum distributions out of a traditional IRA, not out of a Roth. So if you have to make these distributions, I remember I was at my mom's pool one day, and she's in a 55+ community, and it was hot dog day, Sunday's hot dog day. So I was talking to all these retirees, they were eating the hot dogs, and I asked them, what do you think about the minimum distributions? And these people would get very upset that they had to take out money that they didn't need and had to pay income tax on it. Well, under these new rules, what I could do is instead of doing the required minimum distribution or the full required minimum distribution, I could have that money go directly to a charitable organization. Now, a charity doesn't care if you pay them in pre-tax dollars or after-tax dollars. A dollar is a dollar. But it gives you the ability to reduce your taxable income, pay the charity with pre-tax dollars. Now, one of the ways that I love that we make this very easy is we give you a checkbook. So when you're going out to some of those fundraisers, you just keep your checkbook in your pocket. And when they come around, you write a check for $100, $500, whatever the case may be. And we have a list of all the charities that we've given money to directly from your IRA. And by doing that, we haven't increased the amount of income. We don't have to pay any income tax on it. It's a way I can satisfy my required minimum distributions. Another thing that you should think about as well, too, is that these are some of the basic strategies that are out there, but you could also incorporate some of these things into your estate planning strategies. So, for example, under the new tax rules, you have to pay out your IRA within 10 years to a beneficiary, non-spousal beneficiary. That could create some very bad tax issues. If the money goes directly to an IRA, to a charity, it means that they receive that money and your kids don't have to pay any income tax. If you have some assets that you could swap out, this is a great way to do it. There's also some more advanced financial planning charitable strategies that we use, such as grant and retained annuity trusts, and other really sophisticated type programs. And if you're looking at larger contributions, that's something that we should probably sit down and talk about it, because there may be some ways that we could do it in an incredibly tax efficient manner. So Jeanne, why don't you tell us a little bit about giving locally?
Giving locally. Okay, so we have a lot of folks that are out there, a lot of our clients that have the ability to give at this point in time. They're asking, how do we best respond in this crisis? And so we just have some suggestions and some thoughts. First one would be, give locally. Unlike natural disasters, which are usually based on a certain place or certain location, this pandemic is really kind of everywhere based. And sometimes the best places to start are in your own communities, where you're most familiar with the needs, nonprofits, and people. And second thought is, go with who you know. If you have favorite nonprofits that are out there, how are they responding? Find out and reach out to them and find out what are they doing right now to serve the community in this crisis, and maybe what do they need most, and how do they need help from you. Another thing we can look at is, there are a lot of new philanthropies and charities that are popping up to deal with issues specific to this the pandemic right now. In my hometown, there's a new charity that had popped up. It's called the Frontline Appreciation Group, or FLAG. And for a donation that you make, they provide a sign that they put in your yard, and it says, "Thank you, healthcare heroes." So it's a way to kind of recognize my neighbors who are on the front lines. And as another part of that donation, proceeds go to buying meals for first responders and hospital staff. And the food that they're providing, that comes from local restaurants. So I look at this as kind of a great way to create a win-win-win. You know, I'm able to kind of put a sign in my yard that says thank you to the people who are right on the front lines and doing all that they can right now. We're feeding people who are doing what they do best. And then we're also supporting restaurants who are in desperate need of business at this time. Again, a win-win-win. Next, look at, trust the experts to do what they do best. Now really isn't the time for you to, have restrictions or to direct how your donations should be spent. We need to trust our nonprofit partners to direct the donated funds to go where they believe it will have the most impact. And next, take stock of what you have and what you need. And if you're able to maybe stretch during this time, to give a little more to the folks who are more severely impacted during this crisis. And then we should really be looking, anticipating, mid and long-term needs. We're in crisis mode at this point in time, and at some point we're going to be moving past that, and we'll need to address the longer-term effects of unemployment, hunger, physical and mental health needs. There may be greater need, in fact, in the future. So if you can, maybe start thinking and planning for future giving as well. And then finally, look at this as maybe an opportunity to reflect. Many people right now are, they're talking and writing about how life is going to be different, how it's going to change and affect society going forward. Now's really a great opportunity for each of us and our families to reflect on who we are, how we act, interact, what we believe in, and then how we potentially like to operate in the future.
Great. So before we talk about kind of protecting yourself when you're giving or when you're being charitable, we wanted to do one other quick second poll here, and this is looking at how the coronavirus has influenced where you plan to allocate your charitable donations this year. So I know some of you said that you were planning on donating the same or a little bit more than you've done in past years. We're kind of interested in, do you see yourself changing where you're making your donations completely this year, or actually adding in to give to new organizations, or are you going to focus on your own kind of tried and true organizations that you're passionate about? So you guys can take a moment just to respond to that. We'll see what the results are. Let's see what the results are. So, all right, so Jerry's going to talk a little bit now about, as I mentioned before, about protecting yourself when you're actually making donations.
Yeah, actually, just before that too, one of the things I want to suggest is that it's not just about money. I think a lot of you have tremendous talent and the business expertise that you've had over the years, and if we could retool those things and focus it on trying to get something positive out of some of the areas that need our help out there, we could provide some tremendous value that's even better than money. I had a very interesting situation where a few weeks ago, one of my clients whose business literally shut down called me up and she says, listen, I got access to N95 masks. Anybody who wants them. So I bought a bunch of these things. And over the past week, I've gone to police departments, fire departments, first aid squads. I went into the pizza place and I gave 20 of these things to the guy who owns the pizza place down the street, and I felt so good about myself. So there's a lot of little things that you can do that could really have an impact on a lot of the people around you. I gave 30 to the DPW. The guy was 6'7", biggest guy I ever seen. I thought he was going to cry. I mean, it was amazing to see when you help somebody, how that impacts them and how they feel about themselves. So one of the things that I take pride in is that I am incredibly possessive of your money. And I want to make sure that any dollars that you have that you want to send to any charity or to help people and so forth goes in the right directions. Unfortunately, with these types of situations, there are people out there that are incredibly unscrupulous and will do whatever they can to take you and your money and pocket it, which is unfortunate. So the first thing you need to understand is that when you're shopping online, and more of us are shopping online right now because I don't want to stand in line, do you trust the website? Do you feel very comfortable that the website is yours? A lot of these websites are being set up to look like Amazon, and they're not Amazon. They might be something similar, but once you put your credit card in there, you're not going to get your money back again. They claim things that just don't make sense. There are no cures for the coronavirus right now. There's no cures, there's no vaccines or anything like that. So if people are telling you that you're seeing these things that prevent things that don't really seem like it makes sense, it probably doesn't. The other thing I would say is be careful on the phone calls that you get. I mean, I get phone calls all the time, and what I'll do is say, all right, who are you representing? Then I'll go to the website and call them up and say, do you have people that are calling us up regarding this? And if the answer is no, then I won't give the people a call back. But a lot of people will use this opportunity to dial for dollars and try to see who wants to help, homeless kids, or, again, I get it. But just before you send them any money or give them your credit card information, give us a call. We'll research that organization. We'll make sure it's legitimate. And again, don't buy cures, remedies, vaccines. They don't exist right now. If there's something you can do, give money to a food bank or something locally, the people that are around you that really need your help, that is a solid foundation and is really going to be out there to try to help people. Again, our goal when we do this is to just make it as easy as possible for you to do the things that you want to do to help some of the people around you. And whatever we can do to help, I'm happy to do it. So, Gretchen, what kind of fun humor do you have for everybody out here today?
So here's our latest installment of some coronavirus humor. So I hope you guys find it as funny as I did. And I'm still hoping for one day to see the toilet paper aisles filled once again at a grocery store. So we've now gotten to the end of the formal presentation. What we're going to do now is field some questions if any of you have specific issues that you'd like to have addressed right now. There were a couple questions that came in, but obviously if you'd like to type them in, please do, or else you can also forward them to us after the webinar and we can follow up with you directly. So I do want to ask a couple that had come in already though. Someone wrote in, what's the difference between a family foundation and a donor advised fund? Do they operate the same way?
Similar but different. Usually a family foundation is something that is a lot more complicated. You're talking about putting a lot more money into it. We manage several of those right now, and there's several $1 million of funds in each one of these things. The advantage of these types of programs is that I have a lot more control over who gets the money. So for example, I have one of my clients who wants to have a music teacher at one of the high schools he wants to. The school doesn't have the budget for it. He pays that teacher directly from his family foundation. You can't really do that with a donor advised fund. You lose control over that. A donor advised funds work well from several $1,000s, probably up to about $100,000. The administrative fees are a lot less expensive. I don't need to file tax returns. The legal documents are a lot less. So this is something that makes a little bit more sense in a variety of different situations.
Okay. Someone else wrote in, if I'm 55 and I have an inherited IRA, can I do a qualified charitable donation?
I'll go ahead and take that one. Unfortunately, the short answer is no. In order to do the QCD, you need to have a required minimum distribution, which you do, but you also need to be over the age of 70 and a half, or really 72 at this point. So unfortunately, at this point, you have to take out the distribution and you cannot give the funds directly to charity. It has to come out first before you can give it.
Okay. Someone else asked if they can do a qualified charitable donation from their 401k.
Go ahead, I'll take that one as well. Okay. So you are required, you have required minimum distributions from your 401k, but it operates differently than the IRA. And unfortunately, you can't do a QCD from your 401k. But what you can do is another option is if you roll the funds from your 401k, you can roll it into an IRA and then make the qualified charitable distribution from there. So there's another option as a way to do that.
Okay. Someone was wondering if they already took their RMD this year, can they put it back and do a qualified charitable donation instead?
I'll go ahead and take this one as well. So if you've already taken your required minimum distribution this year, you have, with the CARES Act, you had the ability within 60 days to put it back into your IRA. So you could put it back in. You could do the qualified charitable distribution at that point as well. One thing to keep in mind, though, is this year you don't have to take a required minimum distribution. That's also part of the CARES Act. So it's really been waived for 2020. But if you do want to make a contribution out of your IRA, doing the distribution out from directly to a charity is a good way to go.
Okay. And there's one last question that came in about the qualified charitable donation. Someone was wondering if they did one this year, does it count towards my RMD next year?
I'll take that one. No, it doesn't. You don't have to do an RMD this year. So if you're doing it, again, you don't really get a benefit, but you're still paying a charity with pre-tax dollars, which is always a beautiful thing. I think that, again, either way, if you get you're not really going to get a tax deduction. However, you're paying with pre-tax dollars. Next year, hopefully we can do this stuff again and, minimize your required minimum distribution.
Okay. All right. So I want to be cognizant of our time today and everyone who's attending. So I think we're going to wrap up our Q&As here. But Jerry, did you have any last comments you wanted to add before we finish up the webinar?
Yeah, I would just say come in with a concept. Tell me, I don't know what I want to do, but I want to do this. And we could kind of sit down and give you some ideas. The beautiful thing about what I do is I meet people for a living. And they tell me all the wonderful things that they are doing, and I could kind of relate that to you. And we could custom design something based on your specifics of your tax return, based on the size of the gift you're doing, and based on what you're trying to do. So if you come in and you just tell me, this is the idea, this is what I'd like to try to do, let us work out the details and make it as tax efficient and easy for you as possible, and then we'll make it happen. But I just want to thank everybody for their time today. I really, truly appreciate working with every one of you. The fact that we could do these types of programs where we're thinking, how can we help other people? I love that. That's amazing. And again, if you need me for anything, please feel free to give me a call. Jeanne and Gretchen, thank you so much for all your help on this today. As you see, I just get all the glory and they do all the work. So it's always a beautiful thing. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.